What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, Chris, Fedor, cleveland.com, Cavs beat reporter, and Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com columnist. And we're coming to you guys during the week of the playoffs, before the first round matchup between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Toronto Raptors. The Cavs have gotten in some work over the last couple of days, and we wanted to debrief on what has been going on behind the scenes. Guys, we got our first media availability on Wednesday when it came to the Cavs practicing, and even before then, Donovan Mitchell gave us a little behind the scenes look as to what was going on, and it looked tiresome. They had guys on the floor. Naquan Tomlin was laying on his back in the locker room after a practice, his eyes completely closed. Dennis Schroeder was laying on his side, scrolling through his phone, trying to do anything to distract himself from what had just happened. And then Olivier Sarr, obviously a two-way player, but still in the midst of this, had a massage gun directly on his legs following this workout. Evan Mobley talked to us after practice today saying they were doing versa climbers. Kenny Atkinson said it was team bonding, but it was competition based. Obviously, we can look back to last year where the Cavs got their first taste of what true pace feels like in an NBA setting with the Indiana Pacers. And we're not saying that the Toronto Raptors are the Indiana Pacers. Obviously, their pace is much lower in the rankings statistically throughout the regular season than the Indiana Pacers were at last season. But they can still get out in the transition. And that was one of the areas that we had bookmarked for this upcoming series, and the Cavs not allowing the opposition to run them out of the gym. What do you guys think this says about the rigorous conditioning that the Cavs were putting themselves through as they were getting off a rest day and then coming in and saying that they're not done with this conditioning and they're not done preparing in any caliber for this Toronto Raptors squad?
I guess we'll see. I think the Raptors are the kind of team that you have to play against. You have to feel them. You have to understand their speed and all of the things that they do from that standpoint. I don't think it's something that you can simulate because the Cavs aren't the Raptors and they don't have the same personnel and they don't play the same kind of way. Since James Harden arrived in Cleveland and the Cavs made that roster shakeup, they've played at one of the slowest paces in the entire NBA. So when you play against Toronto, that's number one in fast break points, one of the best teams in terms of converting turnovers into points, I do think it's something that you kind of have to feel, you kind of have to experience, you kind of have to go against before you have a true understanding of what it's actually going to be and what it's actually going to require from you to manage that and combat that sort of thing.
What all this tells me, first and foremost, all this conditioning tells me the Cavs were, at least the Cavs believe they were really out of shape last postseason, right? It's kind of a catch-22. Someone tells you, "Hey, you lost some weight." It's like, all right, nice. I've been working out, but it's also like, man, if they can tell, I must have really needed to lose some weight, right? It's like, and we had inklings of this last year during the postseason. The Cavs weren't playing some of their guy like a Donovan Mitchell per se, your usual load of superstar minutes. It was more of a 35-minute workload as opposed to your usual, high 30s to 40, because 30, as the Cavs told us, 35 minutes against the Pacers is not 35 minutes against everybody else. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, the Pacers showed us by beating them up and down the court, outrunning them in transition, that sort of stuff. They showed us and they told us with their actions that was an issue. And then all this, the fact that we're still talking about it a year later, it's still a wait and see thing. Again, the Raptors are not the Pacers. The Raptors do not have Tyrese Halliburton. The Raptors need your help to fuel their break. They need you to give them the ball. They are very good at taking the ball from you. The Cavs have some pretty good ball handlers, though. They need you to miss shots. The Cavs are pretty good at shooting. I could see that being another test, another a feeling out process in the series. The other thing, as Kenny continues to talk to us about conditioning, granted, we're asking about conditioning, but they're doing a lot of conditioning. That's why we're asking. The Cavs have had an entire season to prepare for this conditioning stuff. The Cavs have. Not every Cav. It's not true of every Cav. James Harden has not had an entire offseason to prepare for this kind of stuff. Let's not get twisted. James Harden's one of the most durable superstars of all time. Clearly, the guy takes very good care of his body, knows how to keep himself healthy. That being said, some of James Harden's lower playoff moments where just he doesn't call for the ball, or when he gets the ball, he doesn't do stuff with it. I have often wondered, and it's been like a conversation about James Harden, like, does he just get tired? Are the playoffs so intense and the style of play that James Harden employs, this ISO heavy, I'm going to do a lot of dribbling, I'm going to shoot a ton of step backs, a lot of stop and start, acceleration, deceleration, like that's hard on you, particularly when the intensity is ratcheted up. That's a question I have. Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder. Again, by virtue of like they were on the Sacramento Kings, everything that the Sacramento Kings do is at least a level or two below what other teams are doing. Maybe at certain points in the season, those two didn't think they would go to the playoffs. Then they get here and the Cavs are doing all this crazy conditioning stuff that they've been doing all year. That's something to watch as well, I would say.
I think it's interesting you bring that up, Jimmy. Obviously, in part because of Keon and Dennis, they're more so on the ball, and they could be tasked with guarding for 94 feet and all these things that wears on the body, right? But I thought it was also interesting to your point about James Harden that he made a point to say that even while he wasn't playing in these games over the last couple of games of the regular season, he was still getting his conditioning in. And it reminded me back to the moment where Chris reported when James Harden was first getting into the Cleveland Cavaliers sphere and he was doing stairs. I believe it was in Denver before a game and then went and played 30 minutes. I was like, oh my God, you're going to wear yourself out. Or are you simply just catching up on the work that the Cavs have been doing that you simply hadn't been doing? And I think there's two sides to each story, right? And I think it'll be interesting to see, to your point, Jimmy, how James Harden holds up throughout the playoffs. But there was another portion of practice that I thought was interesting, and I think social media caught wind of this as well. When practice ended and the guys were still getting their shots up in their individual workouts, Max Strus was the player with a wine-colored jersey on. For those who don't know, if you're wearing a wine-colored jersey in practice, it usually signifies you're a starter. Also, in pictures on the Cavs social media pages, Sam Merrill was pictured wearing a wine-colored jersey at points throughout practice. Also, we've noticed that Dean Wade was not wearing that, right? He had a gray jersey on for majority of practice. And then after practice, when he was going through his individual shot workout, he didn't have a jersey on at all. He was just out there with a t-shirt on, right? So I think it doesn't necessarily track back to the Cavs are necessarily deciding on who is the starter between Max Strus and Sam Merrill. I think Kenny Atkinson is still experimenting. And we've had this conversation on this podcast before about the Cavs should probably deploy Dean Wade against Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes in this type of series. But I think Kenny Atkinson wants to see what it would look like with Max Strus and or Sam Merrill with variations of the core four, the new core four, whatever we're calling it, this version of James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen, because the Cavs still, to this point in the season, with just days ahead of game one of the postseason, do not have a lineup that they can readily go to without thinking about, are we giving up something?
If this was Friday, if this was a shoot around before the first game, I would be looking heavily at the color of the jerseys. But it was Wednesday, and I do think that the Cavs are mixing and matching these lineups and these rotations because there are different guys that are going to be with different groupings. And sometimes it's going to be Dean Wade, sometimes it's going to be Max Strus, sometimes it's going to be Sam Merrill, sometimes it may be Jalen Tyson. And I think that the beauty of this situation that the Cavs are in right now when it comes to just all of these wings is that there are other options. There are other playable options that if one matchup doesn't work for one guy, then maybe it works for another. Or if one situation doesn't work for one guy, maybe it works for another. I'm going to say I do not buy that Kenny Atkinson has not figured out who his starter is in this series. There is nothing that tells you that it should be Max Strus. Nothing. There is nothing that tells you that it should be Sam Merrill. Nothing. Everything tells you that it should be Dean Wade. The size, the length, the athleticism that the Raptors have. If there's a series where Dean Wade should be the starter, it's this one, so that he can guard Brandon Ingram, so that he can guard Scotty Barnes if he needs to. Look, there are other series where maybe it makes more sense to go with Max Strus. There are other series where maybe it makes more sense to go with Keon Ellis. This one, this particular opponent, everything that Kenny said was about it's matchup dependent. It's about how are these guys playing? Who's giving us the best chance? What is the other team going to use against us? Even if Emmanuel Quickley is not right and he can't play game one, it still points to Dean Wade, because asking Max Strus to guard Brandon Ingram, nope. Asking Sam Merrill to guard Brandon Ingram, you're trying to set a tone, right? Especially at the very beginning of the game. Making Brandon Ingram, the guy with a little bit of playoff experience, the Raptors don't have much playoff experience, but a little bit of playoff experience, one of their best pure scorers, making that guy as uncomfortable as possible at the beginning of the series, at the beginning of game one, that is beneficial to the Cavs. And who's the person that has the best chance of doing that? It's Dean Wade. The other thing is that Dean has been the starter every single game that he has been available since December, since they made the decision to go away from DeAndre Hunter. Long time ago, DeAndre, oh boy, PTSD there. When they made the decision to go away from DeAndre and put Dean in the starting lineup, every single time Dean has been available, he has been the starter. The only time that he hasn't been in the starting lineup and it's been Max, or it's been Sam, or it's been Jalen Tyson, Dean has not been available. So to me, every sign imaginable points to Dean Wade. And when you have this level of success, the Cavs haven't had a whole lot of continuity. They haven't had a whole bunch of lineups that have played together. 0 of their 5-man lineups have reached the 100-minute mark this year. So there hasn't been a whole bunch of continuity. They are still kind of searching for certain lineups and combinations. But the one thing that has been successful, and the one thing that seems to work for this group, is Dean Wade surrounded by whoever else is going to be in that starting lineup. So Kenny said earlier today that he hasn't figured out who his 5th starter is, and there's still some things up in the air, especially with who Toronto may have available, who Toronto doesn't have available. I don't buy it. I believe that he's made up his mind, and I would be surprised if it's not Dean Wade in the starting lineup on Saturday afternoon.
Especially for game one early in this game, right? Like, this whole series is going to hinge on, can Toronto score enough? Basically, that's how I'm looking at it. So why would you give them an opportunity to boost their confidence on that end early in this series? Like, just put the cuffs on them early. Put Dean Wade on their best offensive player. Make it hard. Make it hard on them. Sam Merrill and Max Strus are wonderful players for a bunch of different reasons, but Brandon Ingram can just shoot over either one of those guys. The Raptors, while, again, they get in their own way a lot of the time on offense, like literally, their spacing is very cramped, and the driving lanes aren't great. So I think you can turn their water off. There's a scenario here where part of the thinking on my end of this being a quick series is like the Cavs can shake the Raptors' confidence early, and then that can snowball. That could snowball. But the inverse can be true too. If you give the Raptor a cookie early on in the series, to throw back to those old child book series, they might start to feel themselves a little bit, right? And you just don't want that. You don't need this. You don't need the Raptors, who are a very good defensive team and are capable of hanging in with you on that end. You don't need to give them unnecessary confidence.
So here's the other thing. If you guys could pick a player not named Evan Mobley that you want to start with the Brandon Ingram assignment, who is the person you're picking?
Dean Wade.
Chances are the head coach of this basketball team is thinking the same thing, right? He's not a dummy. He has all of this data. He has all of this information. He's very, very analytically driven. So if we say, hey, the best option to guard Brandon Ingram is Dean Wade, and then, Joe in Strongsville can pick up on the fact that the best option to guard Brandon Ingram to start a series is Dean Wade, and then Steve in North Royalton can pick up the same thing, I'm quite certain that Kenny Atkinson realizes it as well. So if you're picking the guy that you want to guard Brandon Ingram at the very beginning of this series, the guy that you would pick is Dean Wade, if it's not Evan Mobley. And then if you say, well, Evan Mobley is going to be on the other one, who do you want guarding Scotty Barnes? That answer is the other one. It's whoever's not guarding Brandon Ingram between Dean Wade and Evan. This is why Dean's here. This is his value to this team. This is what makes him an asset. This is what makes him who he is. This is how he has built his reputation, guarding these types of players that look like that have that kind of size, that kind of scoring ability.
Kenny Atkinson has also given us hints towards this, even though he's tried to lead us astray a couple of times, like today, saying that he doesn't know. But before Dean Wade got back, he was like, you know who I really like next to Jared Allen and Evan Mobley? Dean Wade. You know who I really think is a good fit in the starting lineup? Dean Wade. Now you have that option back at your disposal. And as Kenny Atkinson said after practice today, the only person who had any limitations, and we kind of thought this could be the case at practice today, was Thomas Bryant, which means that the Cavs are going into round one, the first game of the playoffs, with their full rotation, potentially, barring anything happens Thursday or Friday, knock on wood, knock on everything, for the first time this season. But I want to get into our next segment. And Jimmy, you have become our statistical guru, surfing through basketball reference, surfing through cleaning the glass and all these other stat databases to find the most nuanced stats. So I thought I saw on Subtext, our subscription service, where we send out the insight that is not readily available on regular social media platforms. Jimmy, you're picking the brain of some of the subscribers, but also giving them some insight into the James Harden dynamic, especially heading into the postseason. You mind breaking that down for us?
James Harden's in a fascinating situation entering this postseason where if the Cavs go to the conference finals and win a game in the conference finals, and that's all they do, he will become the winningest postseason player to never win a championship, which is a fascinating distinction because, like, it indicates, well, first of all, it indicates that you didn't win a championship. And superstars who don't win a championship, they get an asterisk on their entire career. Just how it works. Charles Barkley gets made fun of on the set by Shaq and Kenny all the time, but he's never won a championship. Charles Barkley is a top 30 or 40 player of all time. It doesn't matter if you haven't won a championship. You don't get to come in the club with us. Ha ha, Charles Barkley. James Harden is now climbing that list an even higher degree. He has done so much in the postseason. I didn't throw this out on Subtext yet, but this is in a column I'm writing for the morning. He's also top 15 all-time in playoff points scored, top 10 all-time in playoff assists, top 5 all-time in playoff three-pointers made, top 20 all-time in playoff win shares. Wait a minute, I thought the guy doesn't win. He's top 20 in win shares. He is such a fascinating player. His entire career is so fascinating not just because of this dichotomy that we have here where James Harden has never won a championship, but he's won a lot. The circumstances under which he loses is fascinating too. And he alluded to this a little bit today at practice. Like, he ran into a dynasty. A couple times James Harden gets into the playoffs. He's got a really, really good, like an all-time great team in his own right with Chris Paul. It just so happens that they do that at the same, well, as in reaction to, they got Chris Paul in reaction to the Golden State Warriors signing Kevin Durant. What are you supposed to do? Nobody beat that team. Even the Raptors, who technically beat that team after Kevin Durant tore his Achilles and Klay Thompson tore his ACL. What are you supposed to do? The Rockets took that team to 7 games and to 6 games consecutive years. No other team pushed them that far twice, by the way. But the thing about that is, you could argue in both cases that James Harden's team should have won those playoff series. And part of the reason they didn't is because James Harden underperformed in key moments. So he is just like, he's like this poster child of great player who never got over the hump in the NBA. He is that guy for this generation. I think for that reason, we're going to do this segment here. I don't see how James Harden isn't the answer to who has the most postseason pressure on them.
Well, I think that's interesting, right? And let's get into this conversation because you mentioned before there's this list, this grouping of players who have had so much playoff success and yet have never won a championship. So you're left outside the club, to use your term. Donovan Mitchell has never missed a postseason in his 9 years in the NBA. James Harden has never missed the postseason in 17 years in the NBA, right? We expect Donovan Mitchell to have a long, prosperous career. Is he going to go 100% in postseason appearances throughout his career? Who knows? But we're in the present. So obviously, Donovan Mitchell has never gotten past the conference semifinals, whether you're looking at the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference. That's why some people are putting him in this category of he needs to win more than anybody else. Kenny Atkinson because we understand, and we have said this on this podcast, if the Cavs flame out early, everything is on the table. James Harden, Jimmy listed it out beautifully. You have so many instances, so many reasons to believe that these are the three people that need success in the postseason, in this postseason, more than any other. Chris, I'm curious, who do you have at the top of your billboard that says that player needs to win this postseason or their legacy could be forever tainted?
The top two names are Cavaliers. Think about that. There are going to be 16 teams in the NBA playoffs, a ton of different players that are going to face a level of scrutiny and a level of pressure. The two with the most pressure on them, Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. Put them whatever order you want to put them in, but there's a case to be made for both. Donovan is at the peak of his powers. He's in the prime of his career. He's going to be in MVP conversations. He's going to be on my MVP ballot, one of the 5 names on my ballot. He's going to be battling for one of the all-NBA teams. For him, he has gotten a lot. The Cavs have done a lot for Donovan. The kind of pieces that they've put around him, the kind of concessions that they've made for him, and he's done a lot for the Cavs as well. So it's been a mutually beneficial thing. But if you go and you go get James Harden so that he's a more mature, more ready running mate for Donovan, and now all of a sudden Donovan's got the best sidekick that he's ever had in his career, better than Utah, better than his first couple of years in Cleveland, and he doesn't get out of the second round with this path that he has, yes, people are going to be pointing the finger at him asking, when is it going to happen? Can he do it? Can he be the Batman, or does he need to be the Robin? And James Harden, the hard thing with him is that he's still good, but he's not Houston James Harden, right? He's not MVP level James Harden. So his game has taken a slight step back. But at the same time, he's running out of chances here. So that increases the pressure exponentially. And if it doesn't happen here, next to Donovan Mitchell, in the Eastern Conference instead of the Western Conference, where does he go that's going to give him this elusive chance? So I think he feels the pressure of that. I think he welcomes the pressure of that, but I also think he feels like there is a ticking clock here, because there is. This is year 17 for him. He's 36 years old. How many more chances like this is he going to? Part of the reason why he wanted out of Los Angeles is he, at this stage of his career, he didn't want to have to fight just to get the 7 seed, he didn't want to bust his ass, play as hard as he did, do the things that he did for Los Angeles, all to have it lead to the 7 seed. He didn't want that. He wanted a real shot, a real championship chance. And this place gives him that. This teammate, Donovan Mitchell, gives him that. And if it doesn't happen here, going through maybe the Raptors, maybe the Pistons, depending on what happens in all these series, is he going to have an easier road? Has he ever had a theoretically easier path? I can't come up with one. So this is no offense to Detroit or anything along those lines, but we've already talked about the threats in the Eastern Conference. And if you're James Harden and you're toward the end of your career, and this is year 17, you're looking at this situation saying, hey, this might be my chance. This might be my chance. If it doesn't happen now, when is it going to happen? Is it ever going to happen? So yeah, I think no team is under more pressure than the Cavs, and no two players are under more pressure to kind of rewrite the narrative and change the reputation that they both have, some of it fair, some of it not, than James Harden and Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, this is kind of like the last great chance for James Harden to win a championship, because, and this is the tricky part of this trade too. On the one hand, you're trying to fit in a ball-dominant star, a unique type of player into your ecosystem with 27 games together. I think if you gave the Cavs truth serum, they would tell you, hey, this pairing will work better next year than it will this year. but like there's just no guarantees at this point. You start getting 36, 37, we just don't know. Like we're already basically in uncharted territory with like the James Hardens and the Steph Currys and the Kevin Durant's, LeBron. Like they're all awesome. It's incredible. But like every step they take at the level they're at, and some of them are on different levels than others, is like more unlikely than the last one. You get to all NBA players 37 or older, which is how old James Harden would be next season. 4 guys: LeBron, Duncan, Kareem, Curry. James Harden has aged pretty well. Frankly, aged better than I thought he would. Back when he was in his prime, putting together some of the craziest usage rates we've ever seen, and living his life off the court the way he was. Like he's aged pretty freaking well. But you never know. There is no such thing as a durable 37-year-old player. Look at LeBron. LeBron's amazing. He's still playing like 60 games a year, 60 plus games a year at his age now. But he's getting more little tweaks. Those are popping up more frequently, and those are taking longer to treat. That's the law of nature. That's how this works. So the best time for James Harden to win a championship was yesterday. The second best time is right now, especially considering Chris's point. Like, and this is where I think this is the difference between James and Donovan, is that because Donovan still has more time than James. If Donovan was like, all right, I need out of here, I want to go win a championship, he'd have 20, 25 suitors. If James Harden tries to pull the shoot at this point, it's a smaller handful of teams. It's a harder sell for teams to sign up for. And because James Harden has a longer track record of playoff ups and downs, I think he probably would catch more of the blame for any potential playoff fall. Obviously, context matters. If Donovan doesn't play well, then yeah, Donovan would get the blame. But he would probably catch more of the blame than Donovan would for any potential playoff fall. There's a potential here. I was having this thought today as I've been just in thinking a lot about James Harden of it all. Donovan's playoff underperformance, again, he doesn't underperform, but like his team's underachieving in the playoffs is it's like more tragic because Donovan's like going out on his sword. You know, he's putting up all these crazy numbers, and he's rising to the moment, and he's showing you what his peak is. It's still not good enough. It's still not good enough. And in some ways, that could be more damning. Like you could come to the conclusion that, well, this is this guy's absolute max. At least Harden is not playing up to his par, and that's why we can easily pinpoint why. Like at some point, maybe you're just not good enough. That would be a much harder pill to swallow. I don't think that's true, by the way. I think that yes, James Harden is comfortably the best second star that Donovan has ever had, which seems like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good one. It's 36-year-old James Harden, mind you. You really think about who Donovan has been aligning himself with. He's had excellent defensive ecosystems. Rudy Gobert's a walking top 10 defense. Evan Mobley and Jared Allen are incredible. Like Darius Garland, he wasn't bringing it in the playoffs. Evan Mobley, we still have our questions. In Utah, it was like Mike Conley, who I love. Mike Conley's an excellent basketball player. He's not who I'm going to war with as my number 2 ball handler in the playoffs, right? So I think there's more meat on the bone for Donovan still. There's still more to be explored there. Whereas James Harden, this would be like the confirmation of what has long been believed about him. Now you'd be in the same way that a championship could stamp him as like, yeah, he actually was this guy the whole time, and it was just bad circumstances. An ugly exit here is like, no, you actually were never that guy, and now your legacy takes a potentially even bigger hit.
The biggest thing here, guys, and I feel like a broken record continuously saying this when we mention the Eastern Conference, not just the standings, but the viability of actually getting to the conference finals, this being the best chance for probably both Donovan and James Harden. Detroit, we talk about how they lack postseason experience. They're going to get more this year. Boston, they just got Jason Tatum back. Barring any injuries, you don't think they're going to get better next year when he's back to feeling like true Jason Tatum, especially if they go on a long postseason run? He's going to have the entire offseason. He's going to be hungrier, all these things. The New York Knicks, hell, they could get Giannis this summer, depending on what happens around the league. New York is also led by Jalen Brunson, one of the toughest offensive creators in the entire NBA. Then you got the kind of the sleepers, which really aren't sleepers after this season. Indiana, right? Tyrese Halliburton's going to be back after dealing with not only a ruptured Achilles, but shingles too. So he's going to be back and hungrier than ever to prove that he can get back to his original form. Plus, you got that core of Aaron Nesmith, Andrew Nembhard, Ivica Zubac. And then you have the Charlotte Hornets? I mean, come on. There are teams that are on the rise, even coming into next season, that the Cavs cannot take this opportunity for granted. Jimmy, to your little aside on why it might be more sad about Donovan Mitchell, I think it's sad for both of them because the NBA is full of players that don't love the game. You cannot say that about Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. They have put their heart and their soul into the game, right? Whether that's James Harden pulling aside big men and teaching them different areas that they can improve and exponentially increasing their game and their productivity. We've already seen it with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Donovan Mitchell has been one of the best leaders that the Cavs could have had. And then he also is taking the minor details and improving them to a different level on every given night. How he sacrificed throughout the entire season, how he prepared from the beginning of training camp in summer when Darius Garland and Max Strus were ruled out for the beginning of the season, right? You've gotten to see this. And I was watching a recent podcast episode with Carmelo Anthony and Jose Alvarado on 7 p.m. in Brooklyn. And they were talking about like how difficult it is to watch the NBA, not just the product, but like how players don't love it the same way, right? And how Carmelo and Jose love it a different kind of way. And not necessarily all of the best players love it that way. And I think that's the beauty of, or the difficulty of, watching some of these triumphant players or players who have put their life on hold to play this game that they love and give everything they have and still fall short. That's kind of the thinking of Donovan and James, even Kenny Atkinson to this point. I think Kenny Atkinson loves this game. He's a junkie. He's a film junkie. And seeing them not have the success is not because of the talent or the want to. It's literally opportunity and making the most of it. And I think that's why this season also the Cavs need to be able to do that because as Jalen Tyson said, he wants to do it for James Harden because he's done everything in this league but win, and he deserves it. And I think that's a resounding emotion or sentiment that the entire locker room feels, not just for James Harden, but for Donovan Mitchell and Kenny as well. And I think that might be something that they can rely on, even if it's just small. Like, we want to do it for our guys. We're going to fight for our guys. And we know how that thought process can kind of elevate teams, especially in postseason scenarios.
All these things are true. All these things are fair, guys. And it is our job to lay out the perspective of what has actually happened. But at some point, Donovan's got to win, period. He cannot continue, his teams cannot continue to lose when they're heavily favored. That's the difference, I think. We were having the James Harden conversation, and James has had individual just no-shows where he scored like 7 points. He's gone 2 of 11 from the field. But his teams, which teams has he been a part of that have underachieved? Like, which teams was he on that lost a series that they should not have lost? Nobody's looking at that Golden State series saying Houston, like when it was transpiring, when you were going into that series, nobody was saying Houston's the favorite over Golden State, right? Like Donovan, for all of the great things that he's done from an individual perspective, wasn't his Utah team the favorite against that Dallas team that he lost to? Wasn't his Utah team the favorite against that Los Angeles Clippers team that they lost to? Weren't the Cavs the favorite last year against Indiana? Again, yes, we have to lay out the perspective. We have to talk about the how and the why. But at some point, people just want results. When you're talking about this kind of player that sees himself on this kind of pedestal, and rightfully so, you can't continue to have these losses as a team where you are a heavy favorite. You can't. Going into that series, the Cavs were not picked to lose against Indiana. Going into every single game, the Cavs were favored. When you win these 60 games during the regular season, and you have 64 wins, and you go in as a 4 seed versus a 5, whatever the case may be, those things are part of the equation here. And I do think at some point, people are going to stop saying, well, Donovan's teammates aren't good enough. Or, these crazy things happen throughout the course of a series with injuries and whatnot. At some point, these logical explanations for the how and the why are just not going to matter. It's just going to fall more on Donovan saying, yo, dude, like, figure it out. Trae Young has gotten his team to a conference finals. Jalen Brunson has gotten his team to a conference finals. And yes, a bunch of different things have happened throughout the course of Donovan's career, but I'm saying, like, when you're talking about the pressure that a guy is under and the scrutiny and all of that kind of stuff, part of why it keeps going back to Donovan is that, for a majority of his career, he hasn't individually underachieved, but his teams have underachieved. That was underachievement from an organizational standpoint last year, but it was still underachievement. And Donovan's the face of the franchise last year against Indiana. That can't happen again this year, especially after the Cavs made the moves that they needed to make, gave him the sidekick that he wanted, the sidekick that he needed. Like, this can't be on Evan Mobley anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can't be like the team's not deep enough, the team's not talented enough. At some point, it's going to fall directly on him. And at some point, he's gonna have to lead his team to the conference finals. Otherwise, how he is viewed is going to be quite skewed.
There's also the element where he's in his prime right now. These things hit you harder. They hurt your perception more when you're in your when they happen when you're in your prime, as we saw with James Harden. And Frank, like, okay, let's say it doesn't go as planned in the playoffs this year. And Donovan decides, okay, you know what? I'm done with this. I want to go somewhere else. I don't think you guys have been helping me enough. The next team that trades for Donovan Mitchell, I still believe teams would line up and there would be healthy offers. But part of the decision-making equation is now this dude's going to be 30. He's never been past the second round. And I got to give him a Supermax extension in the next 12 months. I'm thinking a little bit harder about what I'm offering. now. And they can't be overstated the path. This is a really good draw for the Cavs. The two teams that they're going to play most likely in the first two rounds are the two teams that are least equipped to poke at their biggest pressure point, which is three-point defense. The Cavs are going to be able to out-firepower some of these teams. And then we'll see what happens when they get to Boston / the Knicks. There's a ton of scar tissue with both of those franchises. But, like, it's crazy. It really is now or never for both of these guys.
At some point, it just comes down to, can you do it? Can you not do it? Have you done it? Have you not done it? We're not at that point yet, but we're getting quite close.
And is that fair? Is it like the conversation around Harden too? It's like it's binary. It's rings with a Z culture, and I know we don't like that. It's bad that we judge everything by championships, but and it's small sample sizes, right? Like that's what basketball, super into basketball people will say to you is like, well, it's not fair to judge, let's say, the Houston Rockets Game 7 failure because their offense is designed to perform over larger samples and they had one bad shooting night. It happened. That's how the playoffs are determined. Legacies are defined over very small samples, over 7-game series, where one game can swing an entire series, where one fluky hot shooting quarter can swing an entire game, where Donovan Mitchell and his Utah Jazz team were playing against the Kawhi-less Clippers, and Terrence Mann started shooting like he's never shot in his life before or since, by the way, in the corner. And oops, you lost now. Your season's a failure. You won 60 games. Congratulations on all of that, but you lost and you're a failure and you embarrassed yourself now because an NBA player that you decided was worth leaving open started making open shots. Like, that's how this works. It's not fair, but that's why we lavish all the praise on the guys who do it consistently, because it's not fair and because they rise to those moments.
I also think, guys, it depends on the conversation that you're having. If you're having a conversation of the all-time greats, they're great. So what's the separator? The separator is how many rings do you have? How much playoff level success have you led your franchise to? Because it's not all-star. Everybody's got, when you're having those kinds of conversations, and that's the group of players that you're talking about, everyone's got all-stars. Everyone's on these all-NBA teams. Everybody's in the MVP conversation. Everybody's scoring 25 to 30. That's not the separator. You're looking for It's very similar to when you fill out an MVP ballot. It's very, very difficult because you're talking about the best of the best, and you feel like in any instance you're slighting somebody, but you have to put them in a specific order. So you have to find the one thing or the couple of things that you feel like can be a separator, and it's different for every single voter. It's the same thing when you have the conversation about all-time greats or top 75 players or how you're ranking the best current players, whatever it is, this conversation that Donovan Mitchell wants to be a part of. He has worked his way into that conversation. James Harden, the same thing. Well, when that's the conversation, it could be the smallest, most unfair thing, but that's all you have to go to. And right now, for Donovan, that is a separator. There might be guys that he's more talented than. There might be guys where he's maybe accomplished more on an individual basis, but Jaylen Brown has won championship. Jaylen Brown has been finals MVP. Jaylen Brown has helped lead his team to a place that Donovan hasn't. It's a different kind of conversation. It's something that separates some of these guys from Donovan, and he knows it. He understands it as well as anybody.
I think that's the conversation about legacy, right? And it's unfortunate that the love for the game or how you played throughout an 82-game season doesn't necessarily matter. When people look back at Nikola Jokic, they're not going to remember, oh, he wanted to go and play with his horses after winning a championship. They're going to remember he won a championship or how many he won and how many MVPs that came along with it. When Carmelo Anthony, as I mentioned earlier from his podcast, he's not remembered for how great he was as a one-on-one scorer or his three to the head celebration. He's remembered, or lack thereof, because he didn't win a championship. Donovan Mitchell, James Harden. James Harden made a lasting impact on the game of basketball. His step back three will never be recreated in the same way that he introduced it to the NBA. And yet, that might not be enough to remember him by, because other people have done it. Other people will recreate it in a different way, right? The biggest thing that Donovan Mitchell has on his resume is 71. Unfortunately, like 5 other players had 70, and Bam Adebayo has 83, right? So now you have your legacy statement, your legacy moment is watered down, deteriorated because other people have done it. Other people can do it. Other people have proven that they can do it. Not everybody can say that they're a champion. And that kind of is why it puts you in a different upper echelon of conversation. You wonder why LeBron James is still trying to play in the NBA. As many times as he wants to say that he believes he's the GOAT, he understands that there's different conversations with winning titles. He wants to get there if the opportunities will let him.
I mean, LeBron went through something similar. It drove him to Miami. He was so ring-starved that he was looking for somewhere else that gave him a better chance. And people didn't care that he kept going to the playoffs over and over and over again, and people didn't care about this and that. They were like, yo, man, where's your ring? Like, show me a championship. Then you can get in those conversations. So Donovan's not the first great player that has had to deal with this, and James Harden's not the first great player that's had to deal with this, and they're not going to be the last either. But at some point, people are like, yeah, cute stats. Yeah, cool. You've made the playoffs every single year of your career. Great. Where's your ring?
It's an unfortunate culture that we're in, but we'll get to wait and see if James Harden and Donovan Mitchell can meet the moment. Donovan Mitchell, his 9th attempt. James Harden, his 17th, with Kenny Atkinson behind the clipboard trying to orchestrate plays for them and also make sure that their defense doesn't fall off the face of the planet while doing it as well. But those answers will come starting on Saturday in Game 1 of the first round against Toronto. We'll have more content for you guys throughout the playoffs and on the way there. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you send in your weekly Hey Chris questions. You can get a shout out on the podcast. And if you want to stick around, you get daily content, daily conversations that don't always hit the national waves on social media. Subtext gets this information first, gets it more in depth, and it's straight from us. So sign up for a 14-day free trial or Visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page to subscribe for $3.99 a month. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.